You can do that too.
You may go.
You can work that.
Call the meeting to order.
Okay, I call this meeting of the NWC-CAC to order. I'm Terrence Carroll, your facilitator, and also playing the role of Maria Garcia Berry tonight as well. So I'd like to welcome you all here and thank you for being here. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while, but I have this little job that's been keeping me really busy lately. Well, I guess we'll start with introductions. With the new executive director of Focus Points, Jules, is it Ketty or Kelty?
So you want me to go first? Just introduce yourself and then we'll continue going around the room.
The Shad you is number one.
So this is special. I'm Jules Kelty. I'm the new executive director at Focus Points. I've been in the nonprofit industry for about 10 years, and I'm really excited to work with all of you and learn more about this project. So thank you for the warm welcome.
Thank you. You can just start it back down that way again, so we don't get too far out of whack.
Hi, my name's Laura Brzezinski. I'm with the Office of Economic Development in our Housing Division. I'm just giving a brief update on some of the city's affordable housing efforts. Hello, I'm Tina Martinez with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
My name is Armando Payan, and a couple things. I want to say a big shout out to Alba's office and especially Shai. They sent over 40 volunteers, fire department cadets volunteered over to Garden Place to help with the deep clean. And now that school will be rid of benzene over there. And those kids test score should improve and set the DPS on fire. Let's give it a round of applause. I also want to acknowledge Liz, because Liz also co-hosted a fundraiser with Dana Crawford. As you know, many of you know Dana's influence with the city and county of Denver. Her phenomenal stature with Larimer Square was also instrumental in helping us raise another $10,000 for the school as well to get some infrastructure going on in there and some technology things that we want to move forward. So again, thank you, Liz and CRL Associates. Muchas gracias.
If anyone else has any other thank yous, let's hold them to the community report and public comment at the end.
I gave him permission.
Good evening. I'm Kayla Birds. I'm the executive director at the Grow House.
Mi nombre es Juan Veloz de Iliria y Suancia, el cual represento Iliria y Suancia.
Hello, my name is Rusty Collins. I'm filling in for Jocelyn Hiddle tonight, so I'm with CSU and I'm the director of the Denver Extension Office.
Hi, I'm Ann Hayes and I'm with Westfield Company.
Paul Andrews, I'm the CEO of the National Western Stock Show.
Terrence Carroll again, your facilitator and treasurer of the board of the Western Stock Show Association.
Good evening, Brad Dodson. I'm the Deputy Director for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. I am filling in for Gretchen Hollera this evening. Gretchen is the keynote speaker for the Greenway Foundation's reception on the river this evening.
John Sapien, Globeville.
Larry Burgess, President of the Business Association.
Jim Garcia with Tepeyac.
Susan Aldrete with Councilwoman Ortega's office.
Vernon Hill with JJJ Properties and Globeville Civic Partners.
Victor Zeppelin with Zeppelin Company.
Dave Willett with Globeville.
Shai Montoya with Councilman Albus Brooks' office.
And Liliana Flores Amaro representing Swansea, as well as the CAC, one of the CAC representatives to the authority board.
I'm Debbie Franklin, Swansea Area.
Thanks, Debbie.
I'm Liz Adams from CRL Associates. In case anybody's wondering, Maria is doing well. She had her second knee replaced and is recovering. Sends her best, and I will be seeing her tomorrow. So she seems to be doing well. We're trying to keep her from working. It's not easy.
Paul Engel with Amoresco.
Summer Westbrooks with Saunders Construction.
Marcio Akron, Communications with the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
I'm Brian McLaren with City and County of Denver Public Works Department. Eric Anderson, Design Manager for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Jay Rankins with MIG, Placemaking Study.
I'm Melody Ambrose, and I'm with the National Western Center Authority Board.
Hold on, Melody. Melody is officially the first employee of the National Western Center Authority. So,
we are the authority, and we have a lot of authority, no money, but she's our first hire.
That's government for you.
Good. I'm Patrick O'Keefe. I'm the program manager for the National Western Center Capital Bill.
I'm Emily Clark with Kiewit.
Matt Sandman with Kiewit.
William Pineda from CSU, currently studying watershed science.
Crystal Garcia with the 5280 Youth Water Program.
Hugo Lozama from the 5280 Youth Water Project.
Genesis from the 5280 Youth Water Project.
I'm Sean Snow, a Historic and Cultural Resources Manager for the Mayor's Office at the National Western Center.
Hi, I'm Julie Skeen. I'm with CIG. I'm part of the placemaking team.
Thank you, Thank you, everyone, for being here. Let's jump right into it. We have our special presentation on the affordable housing update from the city.
Great. So my name is Laura Brzezinski with the Office of Economic Development in our Housing Division. I'm just going to give a brief update on some of the city's efforts related to affordable housing, but certainly if you have specific questions about these efforts or other things, feel free to let me know where you'd like to dive deeper. So I wanted to just anchor us before we talk about some of the specific efforts in the need that we're experiencing in the city for affordable housing. This first slide is there we go. Okay. Sure, yeah. So the Office of Economic Development provides assistance for housing development and housing preservation and housing programs that serve residents along a continuum of income, from zero for residents experiencing homelessness all the way up to about 100%. The median income for a family of three, that's about $81,000. So you can see at the top here what some of the income levels are specific to Denver. About 88,000 households that earn less than the area median income are what we call cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs, including utilities. In addition to that, we have more than 3,300, I think that bumped up a little bit for 2018, residents who are identified as experiencing homelessness based on our point-in-time survey. That's largely considered to be an undercount, but it gives you at least a snapshot of how many individuals and families throughout the city are experiencing challenges with their housing costs or are looking for affordable housing right now. To help address the need for affordable housing, the city has had for many years federal funds that we invest. The federal government gives the city, and Denver is not just the only city, many cities around the metro area, but particularly Denver, resources to invest into those housing development, preservation, and programs. Our federal resources have declined over the last several years at the same time that our need has increased. So that number of households who are considered cost burden has gone up over time, in part because our housing prices have risen and our incomes have stayed stagnant, so they're having trouble keeping up with that. So in 2016, since our federal funds were going down and our need was going up, the city adopted a new dedicated affordable housing fund. This is an average of $15 million a year that, in addition to our federal funds, which are about $10 million a year right now, the city invests $15 million of its own resources to help create, preserve, and provide programs to help individuals and families along that entire continuum. One component of that is a property tax. So we have a little bit less than $0.50 mil, that's our unit of property tax, that's utilized and dedicated towards affordable housing. In 2017, that portion of a mil, 0.422, generated about $7.5 million But that property tax is a pretty stable and reliable source of funding for affordable housing, and it grows slowly and steadily over time. So that number of 7.5 will gradually increase over time, but it won't be a dramatic increase from that. But it at least gives you a snapshot of what that first year of implementation looks like. The other way that we fund affordable housing here locally is through a development fee. It's called a housing linkage fee. So it's a per square foot fee on all new commercial and residential development throughout the city. It's charged at a time the developer comes in for a building permit. And we have a few different types of fees that are applicable for those residential and commercial development types. I know it's a little hard to see, but it ranges from about 40 cents per square foot to about $1.75 per square foot, depending on what kind of construction a developer is proposing to move forward with. So that fee started applying to new projects in 2017, and we are now collecting resources from that new development impact fee and investing those resources. 2017 and 2018 are the first 2 years that we have resources available through this to be able to invest. We created and preserved more than 1,700 affordable housing units last year alone with these resources, more than the city's ever invested historically to build or preserve in a single year. As part of the adoption of our new dedicated affordable housing fund in 2016, there was a requirement that the city put together an affordable housing plan. So we had to really do robust public outreach and form a new committee. It's our Housing Advisory Committee. It's a 23-member group made up of residents, made up of for-profit, nonprofit developers, finance experts, other partners, that help to inform the development of a 5-year plan to help inform the way that we invest those resources. So we really spent a year getting feedback on the elements of that plan. It was adopted by City Council in February of this year. These are some of the core goals in terms of creating affordable housing, preserving affordable housing, promoting equitable access to housing options, and then really focusing on stabilizing residents that are at risk of displacement through our programmatic investments. This is something that we have started to implement through annual action plans in 2018. We're in the process of developing our 2019 annual action plan. And that includes both ways that we might invest resources to help address our housing needs, but also policy strategies. If we're looking to implement legislative or regulatory mechanisms to help further affordable housing goals, that kind of priority is outlined in this 5-year housing plan as well. One of the key things that housing plan does for us is it prioritizes our investments along that income continuum to serve specific populations. This is really the first time that we have had clear guidance for the city in terms of the investment along that continuum and specific targets for the way that we might invest. I know this might be hard for some to see in the back, but 40 to 50% of our resources, that's both that annual $15 million of local funds as well as our federal funds of about $10 million per year, have to be used to serve individuals and families at the lowest income levels. So that includes residents earning below 30% of the area median income that you saw on that slide earlier, and residents experiencing homelessness. But since we recognize we need affordable housing at each point in this continuum, we also plan to invest 20 to 30% of our resources on higher income rental, as well as 20 to 30% of our resources to support homeowners, both those who are looking to become homeowners and those who are looking to stay in homes that they already own. But that's just a quick snapshot of how the city's housing resources must be used along that continuum of need. So $15 million first adopted in 2016, starting to be invested in 2017 and 2018. Our need, as you saw, is much bigger than that $15 million. So what the city is proposing is to double our dedicated local fund and the city's commitment to affordable housing from $15 million a year up to $30 million a year. This is a proposal that we announced in April and have been working really hard to pull the components together around. And that additional resource to get from $15 million a year to $30 million a year would come from two other sources. So I mentioned the property tax earlier, the per square foot fee on development. We are also proposing to add a $7 million general fund transfer, so put the city's own resources that we get into our general fund towards affordable housing, as well as increase the recreational marijuana sales tax from its current rate right now at 3.5%. We would increase it by another 2%, so go up to 5.5% sales tax on recreational marijuana, which would generate about $8 million a year in proceeds. So all of those four sources then come together to be $30 million a year the city has to invest in affordable housing. And one of the other components of this framework that we are proposing is that the city would partner with the Denver Housing Authority, one of our really critical partners here in the city, to pass through our property tax, that approximately $7.5 million a year that grows slowly and steadily over time, to make possible their issuance of a bond, a taxable bond that would be invested to help accelerate the development pipeline. So they would utilize that property tax, and they're expecting to generate about $105 million in tax proceeds that they would invest to support affordable housing goals consistent with that housing plan we adopted earlier this year in February. So there's two things that $105 million bond proposal would achieve. The first thing is that we would be using about 50% of the proceeds to accelerate the development and preservation pipeline that's part of DHA's own land and development opportunities. So right now they have 3 sites in Sun Valley, in Westridge near the W line at the Knox station, and then Shoshone, which is in the Lower Highlands neighborhood. And they would otherwise be developed into new affordable housing units 10 to 15 years down the line. Well, we have an affordable housing crisis right now. So what this proceed would make possible is the development of those units in the next 5 years. So we would be accelerating that pipeline to make units available faster and more of them. The other piece of this is knowing that we have significant needs for housing at the lowest income levels for our most vulnerable populations experiencing homelessness and those earning below 30% AMI. We have developers who are willing to build at that level, but a challenge of availability of land to help build housing needed for those populations. So what DHA will be doing as part of this opportunity and this framework is to be acquiring parcels of land as well as buildings across the city in geographically dispersed sites that they would then partner with other developers to construct housing that's affordable for very low incomes and permanent supportive housing that has housing as well as supportive services to serve residents experiencing homelessness. So that's really what that $105 million in bond proceeds would make possible through this partnership with DHA. The right side is just the numbers. You can see our existing 2 sources plus those 2 additional sources, and passing through that property tax to DHA makes possible the $105 million in bonds. This slide is just a quick overview of what some of the outcomes are that we expect to achieve through these investments. With our existing housing plan and our existing $15 million a year in dedicated funds, we expected to build or preserve about 3,000 affordable housing units over the next 5 years and serve approximately 30,000 households through programmatic investments. With this additional resource through the recreational marijuana funds, through the general fund, and through the property tax partnership with DHA, we would more than double the number of units we create and preserve over the next 5 years to about 6,200 and increase our number of households to 31,000 over the next 5 years. So this is just a quick snapshot of what we expect to do with those additional investments. We're moving forward over the next couple of weeks actually with this proposal to increase the dedicated fund and partner with the Denver Housing Authority. We are coming forward to City Council for a request to approve this framework in August and could see funds generated from the recreational marijuana tax as soon as this fall, and then the other resources would be made available if approved by Council in January of 2019. So So this is just a quick snapshot of what some of our next steps are there. So I will pause here and just see if you guys have any questions for me about the proposal or other affordable housing issues.
Armando,
Hold on.
hold on.
On that 50 million that the city's going to be working with developers in certain areas of the city, is Global Area Swansea targeted for those funds to work with developers?
Sure, yeah, it's geographically dispersed throughout the city. So there's not one specific target area, but there is a requirement that DHA distribute those funds throughout the city.
The second part of that question, what type of housing? Is it single family, multiple? There's a big push right now for micro units. I'm sure you're aware of those.
Yeah, so predominantly what will be developed as part of that agreement will be tax credit developments that are multifamily residential and rental development. So that's predominantly what we'll see on that. But on the city side, for the funds that we invested the multifamily as well as mostly, I would say, townhomes on the for sale side as opposed to single family. We haven't seen too many developments come forward for single family, but we have invested into townhomes on our fund side as well.
Has the city identified any developments out there that are composed of what we call micro units?
We do have a couple of projects that have come forward for financing from us that have smaller units within. There's one on Broadway right now that we're looking at funding. So there are some properties that are coming forward with that kind of development.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can probably just yell.
Sure.
So there's a lot of land in an area that is currently heavy industrial and really environmentally challenged. But it seems with the North Metro line, whenever it opens, that this would be natural to build that. And I know one of the problems with affordable housing is just the cost of the land. And here you also have the cost of the cleanup. But is there any concerted look at like Elyria and those areas, around? I mean, the stock show happens to own they bought a former junkyard near the post office. I mean, that might be a prime spot, but is there any effort to use that land? Because there's not a lot of parcels of that size in the city.
Sure, yeah, I would say we're certainly looking at this area in addition to other areas for opportunities to acquire land in partnership with DHA. We're also doing a survey of our city-owned parcels that might be appropriate for affordable housing, and certainly this area is part of that analysis as well.
Any other questions? Nikki?
Along with Drew's comments, do you have any plans or proposals for the triangle or part of the National Western plan for affordable housing?
Yeah, I think that's something that we're still discussing with the National Western Center in terms of the specific development. Certainly, the city has invested into affordable housing in a lot of the areas around the National Western Center, but I think that's an ongoing discussion that we're having with National Western about the specific sites.
Now, in terms of making a decision as to which sites to select, you have DHA as a principal party that's making that decision. What is the process? Is the city involved? Does the population get involved? How do we get our voice known, and it seems as though there's a select group of developers who get most of the city funding, and my hope is that it can be expanded and be available to a larger number of developers and city people.
Sure.
Or not other people.
Yeah, good question. So on the DHA agreement for the investments that they'll be making into land acquisition, they will be both looking for opportunities to acquire land and also looking for partners to build on that land. So it may be that we, through that partnership, acquire land and then procure a developer to build vertically on that development opportunity, or that a developer comes to DHA with an opportunity to acquire land and it's facilitated directly from a partner. But to help inform the specific sites and the specific developers that are selected for the vertical construction on those sites, there's an advisory group that's part of the intergovernmental agreement that we're negotiating with the Denver Housing Authority that would predominantly be made up of the funders of affordable housing. So bringing different parties to the table, like the Housing Authority, like the city, like the state and CHAFA, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, to inform the selection of those sites and potentially some joint underwriting together for these developments. But certainly on the city side, we intake applications for our acquisition, our development finance funds on a rolling basis predominantly. So a variety of developers with a variety of different experiences are welcome to apply for those funds as well.
AE.
Even at these, I know this is down the road a little bit, but I just kind of ask that it be part of the conversation how an affordable housing unit or units or complex would be managed in coordination with the National Western Center campus. And the reason I really want that to be part of the formative conversation is because there's a real mixed quality among the especially rentals of affordable housing management. I think it's an unsolved, persistent difficulty. And I think that there are things that we can do to preemptively prevent that and maybe innovate a relationship between the management and the true enriching potential of engagement with the National Western Center to set this apart. So I just want to go on record as saying I hope we'll treat that with great weight and look to a standard that can maybe demonstrate a better way of doing things than are happening in a lot of the complexes, the rental-based ones. So if you want to comment on that, that's great.
Sure, no, I appreciate the feedback. I think we're still thinking through some elements of affordable housing in this area, but I think that's a helpful comment for me to keep in mind.
And I just wanted to add on to that and to respond briefly to Mickey and AE that this really is step one on a longer conversation that we'll have about affordable housing at the National Western Center. Any conversation we have really needs to be grounded in a larger citywide and a North Denver conversation, and so really thankful that Laura is here to really to set that base. And I think Liz and Terrence will be having a more in-depth conversation next month and drill down more specifically on the National Western Center.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm wondering if the conversation's been furthered on the policy about linkage fees that are generated within a neighborhood staying in that neighborhood, as opposed to just going into one big fund and then getting dispersed. I mean, you had 1.5 million showed in linkage fee, but that's going to grow over time. And I know that when I spoke at council, when we were passing the 38th and Blake overlay, there's several of us made the comment that we think if there are linkage fees that are generated in this neighborhood, they should stay in this neighborhood. Has that policy been furthered at all, or has there been any more conversation about that?
So I will just separate the incentive fee funds from the linkage fee funds. So the linkage fee funds go into a citywide pot that are used citywide, but the proposal was to have the city consider when incentive fee funds for context for others. There's the 38th and Blake incentive overlay where there's an increased requirement for developers of residential and commercial development when they're accessing a maximum zoning that's above the base. So to get to that maximum zoning, you have to contribute to affordable housing either through a fee for commercial development or through units if it's residential development. We're still in the rulemaking process, so that's something that we're considering the feedback still. There isn't a formal policy because the rules have not been issued and adopted, but that was one of the list of things that was suggested as part of the rulemaking process for the implementation of the incentive fee just in that 38th and Blake area. So we don't have I don't have a formal response for you, but I can definitely make sure you're aware as the rules are released for public review.
When you say released for public review, I mean, is it going to be a public process to make that decision? Or
So,
is it just going to be decided?
So there's an administrative process to develop the rules, but when administrative rules are proposed, there is a public review process. So there's a public meeting and then there's a public comment period, so there's certainly opportunity for feedback.
John.
Oh, Ann has been gracious
I want to be a little more direct. Areas that are subjected and exposed to the growing processing of marijuana and marijuana products. We bear the burden. As traditional, but we bear the burden for so many other things in the past. I would say that we should get earmarked marijuana funds to go into those neighborhoods that have been earmarked by the marijuana industry. I can't emphasize that enough. We missed the boat on the meatpacking industries and the smeltering industries, but we're here now, and marijuana is big business, and it's also entailing big government. So you raise the money, you raise it at our expense. Our kids are being subjected to all of the ills and evils that grow with growing and processing it, and nobody's saying hardly anything about it. So that money that's generated, old English law, I would say, goes back to the source of it, and that would be in these neighborhoods. You don't have to correct me on that, Brad, stretching it a little bit. I would emphasize that, and I please carry that back to the mayor's office and this whole housing thing. Marijuana money is generated at our neighborhood's expense, so payback is due. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next topic, which are, thank you, Laura, which is, thank you, updates from our NWC partners. And I'd like to remind them that if you could just highlight one or two critical items, that would help us a whole lot since the handouts have been out there already. And Tim, we have NDC on the schedule for the end, so you'll come up at the end, so you can just wait a little bit. Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Speaker. We are pitching the entire world on the National Western Stock Show for next January right now, so we're closing all our sponsorship deals and rodeo contracts. And the other major thing we're doing is meeting with all the major horse show associations across the United States and actually internationally as well to get them prepared for the National Western Center. So those two things are happening currently. Any questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go with Museum of Nature and Science.
So just a reminder, if you guys haven't heard, we just opened a new exhibit called Mindbender Mansion. It's a puzzle room and it's free with admission. And then in terms of our work in the community, we've been really excited to be at some recent festivals and are looking forward to some upcoming events like Adelante 5K and others in September.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from History Colorado? I thought not. CSU, go Aggies, go Rams.
Hi everybody, Rusty from the local extension office. Wanted to thank National Western Center and the county fair planning staff. They did a great job this year. It was probably my best experience being involved with the fair ever, so thanks for that. And for those of you that live in these neighborhoods, I'm looking to hire 2 people here in the very near future, in the next month or 2. And these would be in a position that are called AmeriCorps, which is similar to Peace Corps, but it's done here at home. These are part-time positions where people would go and conduct what we call STEM programming for after-school activities. And STEM programming stands for the initials science, technology, engineering, and math. So I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking for preferably people to come out of this area, and secondly, I'd like to offer that programming in this area, so I'm looking for sites where we could conduct this programming for youth after school. So I'm open for any, and you can reach me afterwards on anything like that. And very quickly, Terrence, I just want to make mention to, we have 4 special guests in the back. I met Genesis when they came in, and they're part of this Water Fellow program. And if one of you'd be willing to just take 30 seconds or so and introduce the project for us.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Hugo Lazama, and I am representing the whole 5280 Youth Water Project, which it's basically 4 high school students and 4 college students of color. And our mission is to advocate and educate the community of Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea about water, and basically tell them about the projects that are going on around this area and how that's going to impact them. So that's basically it in 30 seconds, essentially. And we're also going to have a Youth Water Expo coming up on August 4th at Argo Park. So if you guys are free on August 4th, just stop by and come visit us. So it's free for everyone, free live music, free food, and we're going to raffle a few items like t-shirts and Echo Dots for everyone.
Thank you.
I did pass out the flyer for that with
Yeah, so thank you for that. And on that position, I am looking for somebody that can speak Spanish, if not both of them, preferably. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz will take it. And we'll move on to the NWC Authority Board report. John and Liliana. I'm not sure who's speaking.
Okay.
Or both.
I'll start. Liliana, do you want to do a report on the community effort meeting later on?
Yeah, I think you can
Okay.
go first.
First of all, her name was mentioned. So,
Melody.
Melody, would you stand again, please, and reintroduce yourself as what? She's not just a secretary. I want to emphasize that. She's going to keep things going for us. So.
My name is Melody Ambrose, and I am the first employee, and I am the assistant to the authority board and any of the incoming CEO, any of the other executive staff and stuff. And I am available to help be the authority in a place that people can really come to, and then I'll reach out to Brad and all those others that have been helping where the authority got stood up totally. So that's my job.
Okay. Actually, the authority had quite an extensive meeting this morning, and I don't want to muddle things up. Brad is going to give a presentation later on, and I want to re-emphasize, I mentioned it last month, but this group present today is getting the same material that the authority received this morning. So I want to make sure that you understand we're not shortchanging you on our report, and I want to try and keep it as accurate as possible. So Brad will fill you in on that, and needless to say, he's very able and capable of doing that. Insofar as the other part of our authority meetings, Liliana, would speak to that?
Just another quick update. We're still in the process of going through the hiring of the CEO, and so hopefully we'll have some news for you in the near future. So we're still deep in that process. So just wanted to give you an update there. And then, so earlier, or right after the authority meeting, we had our very first community benefits committee meeting, subcommittee meeting, as part of the authority, and Monique is, hi Monique. Our first meeting, or some of the agenda items that we talked about at our first meeting, was really defining community benefits agreements, learning a little bit more about them. We have some action items as far as really scheduling regular meetings, which we decided were going to happen immediately after all of the authority board meetings. And then if there's, I can keep talking, but you're up there, so you can go.
Yeah, no, don't turn it on. You'll get feedback, so it's just
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Monique, and member of the Authority Board, and the chair of the Community Benefits Committee. That's our working name for right now. Part of what we were doing today was educating ourselves, and the next step is to educate the rest of our colleagues on the Authority Board. And since these meetings happen on the same day, bringing the same information to this group probably next month. But we're really starting a little bit slow in that we have to get buy-in from the whole board. We have to define what community, how are we defining community? How are we defining benefits? So we're kind of starting there. But I think we also reached some consensus about a very robust community engagement plan. This will need to be very broadly, we want to get as much input and much beyond just the CAC when it comes to what are the benefits that the National Western can provide the community now and into the future. And then this would really be a two-way relationship, just like what you have here, where there's accountability on both sides for the community supporting the National Western and the National Western supporting the community. So I think that process will probably kick off in the fall, and we will be reaching out to all of you, but even beyond all of you. And on the way out, we talked about Liliana, about the opportunity of maybe creating a process map. I think I was talking to Susan about that. Not a process map, an asset map. And I don't know if that asset mapping has been done in this community, but I think, yeah, so might as well not reinvent the wheel, but take what's been done before and add to it. So if there are any questions, Liliana and I are an asset map. So it's really taking a look at all the different kinds of stakeholders, assets, community assets, so schools and nonprofit organizations and residents, et cetera, that are, you know. That's true. That's really more, right, so, right. And I think those might fit more really in the benefits arena rather than community assets, but community benefits. And some of this might just be semantics.
I mean, maybe what Armando you're getting at is usually when an accountant does a balance sheet, you have assets and then you have liabilities. So in addition to doing assets, you need to look at liabilities and what deficits. You know, I mean, what I'd say in Elyria, we have a shortage of trees. They're an asset that, you know, many communities have. So just for example.
Any further questions? Liliana?
I just want to clarify or add.
Yep.
There's one coming.
So I think, Armando, I think we're definitely going to be looking at quality of life and figuring out what aspects in the community already lend themselves to it and what could the National Western Center support, or enhance to the overall quality of life in the neighborhood. I think also one thing that's really going to be work for us is figuring out, right, this particular community benefits agreement is with the National Western Center, and so we are continuing to pull language from the master plan, from the framework agreement, in addition to the neighborhood plans, and figure out again, like, what foundation do we already have within what's in those documents, and what else could we do?
Well, you talk about community, and I wish Paul wouldn't have left. Community to him is National Western Stocks. You just talked about talking to all these boards, international boards. To Paul Andrews, that's his community. My community is Global Elyria and Swansea. So from this perspective here, from a global perspective, it's everybody. But the needs need to happen right here, right now. That's what I'm talking about. So don't tell me about all this other stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Today we talked about defining the community, and it really, the primary community is the geographic neighborhoods that surround the National Western. That's where we're starting. That's the true basic, community.
Any other questions? Oh, Brad.
I'm just talking to Liz.
Okay, Brad's going to the front to get ready for his presentation. Is that everything, Liliana and John, from your world? You have a question for who?
For the water fellow.
Oh, okay. AE has a question as Brad goes up for Rusty.
Yeah, I'm sorry for backtracking. I had a question, and we didn't call for questions for the water. I actually have a question for the water fellows. And Rusty, I'm sort of making a point here about. Okay, cool. But I know you are. 100 years ago, in 1918, was the election of the Board of Commissioners for Denver Water, which means 2018 is its 100th anniversary. Are you guys being taught, or are you advancing an appreciation for the various things that have evolved through the Denver Water, which is now, I think, a pretty close partner with CSU in the water building? Anyway, I'm just asking, has anybody in your mentoring arena looped you in on understanding the historic nature of 2018 relative to the water, Denver Water, and how it's been doing problem solving over the years, successfully and unsuccessfully, and how that segues into what we're doing with National Western in water partnerships? Does anybody want to comment on that? And yes, this is a test.
So, back to your question. So, one of our mentors that we had is Mary Lou Smith, that some of you may know by now. And so, Denver Water has definitely helped us a lot more in terms of the history that comes from the beginning of how Denver became a city with like the intersection of the Cherry Creek River, I'm guessing, and the South Platte River. And so, like, it just came down to this history about how the South Platte River just went from a flat-out dumpster river until one of like the cleanest and more safe rivers that we have right now. And so they're still doing a lot of work. Like the Greenway Foundation, they had a competition to collect trash, and also they taught us about the history about the incident that happened a couple years ago around the global area of Swansea, where people don't drink their water anymore because it was contaminated, but in reality it was just their own piping system. Denver Water had nothing to do with a pH or anything like that. So they kind of hold like a grudge against Denver Water, but they have by far one of the cleanest waters in the world right now. And I see people drink like Nestle water, but that one comes from Denver Water. So I mean, they're spending more money than what they should have on water, And to go back to the topic of the Youth Water Expo, our ultimate goal for the Youth Water Expo is to create a youth advisory board, because we've gone to several events such as Shed 18 and a summit at CSU, that was sponsored by CSU, and everyone is, I guess, it's the inappropriate term, but they're mostly white, basically making the decisions for us, but we feel like it's important to diversify the voices within water decision making. So that's what we're encouraging, to get people of color, doesn't matter who they are, but people of color in that table to actually start making decisions, because at the end of the day, what brings us all together? It's water. So it shouldn't just be just white people, which I'm sorry about, but it shouldn't just be white people making those choices, It should be everyone coming together to make decisions in terms of water,
John Sapien for a very short comment.
Very short.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's possible.
I'm biased. I saw this group last year, and I'm watching them emerge. I met with them several times. Agua es la vida, y es importante. I want to applaud these youngsters because they are breaking ground. They're pioneers of different color of what took place in these sites over 100 years ago. So go for it. Adelante y arriba. Keep going.
You're really making a splash.
Yes.
Okay, we're moving on now. Wow, it's 7:30. Oh, sorry, you ran out of time, Brad. Okay, Brad, you're on for the next 10 minutes or so.
Thank you, Terrence. We will make this quick. And as John mentioned, we gave the same presentation to the authority board this morning, so my apologies for the folks that are hearing this for the second time. But we have I'm going to play the role of MC. I'm going to have some help from Karen Nikandakari, from Marcy Loughran. Jay and Eric are going to come up in a little bit and talk about placemaking, and then I'm going to conclude with an update on the Triangle and the city's performance-based infrastructure update. Before I hand it over to Karen to talk about our implementation of our workforce pilot and our Work Now contract, I wanted to point you to the program status report, and there's copies of this that are up on the counter. I think Gretchen walked through this last month. This is our monthly snapshot that really gives you a high-level overview on one page of everything that's happening with the program, an update on where we are on schedule and scope and budget, and so there's copies for that over at the counter for anyone that is interested, and I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about that afterwards if anyone has questions. So right now I want to hand it over to Karen, who's going to talk about the implementation of our workforce pilot as part of our HIT contract.
Thanks, Brad. So you can see up here where it's saying that our contract was actually signed on June 25th for the HIC. Hensel Phelps was the awardee. And right after that, just a matter of a week, we actually convened a onboarding session, kickoff session with them to start working out all the particulars about what they'll be doing, especially the reporting of the metrics. I know many have asked the question about how are we going to connect the job seekers and the different subs that are going to be doing work on this site, and so we are utilizing a initiative that came out of the Community College of Denver. Now I think that's rather significant because sometimes we overlook our institutions of higher learning, and this is where Community College of Denver stood up this initiative called Work Now, and they have brought together core partners to help job seekers get resources they need, whether they're gloves or boots or whatever, or even training, which is always a key component. And then on the other hand, it is also the subs who are going to be informing Work Now what positions are going to be coming available so that they can start getting ready for the training that is needed, so when the jobs are available, they can apply. So this Work Now is rather kind of important. And so, so here is a handout. Thank you, Marcy, for putting this out there. So you can get this, right, and it's up there and it has all the contact information about Work Now, or you can get the nice spiffy folder. Same information, but for those who go quickly, they get it. There is the business card inside and information, and it has a list of the different locations, times, and dates when job seekers can go to get information. So that is all available as well. Okay? Okay.
Any questions for Karen?
I think we'll take all the questions at the end.
All right, we will do that. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Marcy for a construction update.
So I'll speed through this a little bit. We shared the next 3 slides with City Council recently, and we thought we'd bring them here because it's a pretty cool snapshot. So take a look at the work underway. We have, 7 contracts under there. We really have 8 if we include the program management contract with Jacobs, who used to be CH2M. But we're moving. Things are happening here. And if you look at these, we've got all of the awarded entities or prime contracts under here. And we also list here the minority and women business enterprise goals under each of those. So you can see that we've got some great goals throughout that we're working with the small business outreach and DISBO offices to make sure that we maximize the participation within our contracts. And that's in addition to the Work Now. So there's job seekers, there's companies and organizations, so there's just a lot of ways for people to connect through our program. If you go back one more. And again, if you look under the horizontal integrated contract with Hensel Phelps, the goal is not listed there because if you guys remember when we brought the HIC to you, goals will be assigned to task orders 2 and 3 to those work orders, and there'll be multiple opportunities under there, and they are going to work with the pilot of work now, and so that one is just, you're going to see a lot of opportunities rise from there. Our active procurement right now is the stockyards and stockyard event centers for a design. The RFQs are due next Tuesday, I believe, so we will see what we get and who we get them from. And then here's another great snapshot of our future procurements. So we can kind of see the end in sight. If you look at these, we've got the maintenance and ops facility renovation. That's for the construction. All the construction is going to go CMGC. So that's construction manager, general contractor. It's a great process. They work really closely with the designers. There's a lot of collaboration in how that all comes together. And then if you look over here with the equestrian center, parking garage, design and construction, got 2 going out with those. Same with the livestock design and construction. We may be breaking up the stockyards and stockyard event center and just have the stockyards be built in a separate, under a separate contract from the event center, just based on logistics and timing. The last update I wanted to give you guys is the construction update. This week on Monday, we put the new detour or the revised detour in place for Brighton Segment 3. So those handouts are actually up front. They're also on our website, and if you've signed up for our text updates, you should have this revised information. I was out there on Monday, and it was a little rough as people were trying to get used to sort of the new signage and new direction. The last other 2 days, I've been out about 4 hours a day at different times of the day, and today I'm happy to report that things were a little bit more normal in the afternoon than they were in the morning. We had a car broken down on Baldwin Court, so that didn't help any kind of turning radius, and then we had a surprise utility dig over off of York, which then created some, or not off of York, off of Josephine, which created a little bit of drama with the trucks being sent that way and being sent back. So we addressed that pretty immediately and got that shut down, that construction project, because they didn't get the right, it wasn't a National Western project or a dig, and so the city, County of Denver, is able to cover that hole within about 30 minutes, and they need to go through the proper approvals before they went into the ground. So I think we addressed that pretty quickly. I also have Brian McLaren here from Public Works, so if anybody does have questions about the details of why and how things are going with this detour, ask them now, or when Terrence says you can.
Later.
Oh.
We're going to try to get through everybody first, Susan, and we'll come back with questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Marcy. For those of you who may have caught the mayor's State of the City address a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, he talked about the city's sustainability goals. And we're excited as part of the National Western Center campus to play a key part in that, in our pursuit of a net zero energy campus. We are in active procurement right now for a construction and financing partner that would help deliver net zero energy campus through sewer heat recovery, that's using the heat from the Delgany, as well as rooftop solar that could power the campus 100% through alternative energy. And wanted to give you an update on that process. The procurement is going really well. We had 7 responses to the request for qualifications. These were 7 national, international firms who have done campuses, large college campuses, have done entire municipalities. But there was a really strong interest from industry to be part of what's happening at the National Western Center. It was a tough decision, but we shortlisted those 7 proposals, or 7 statement of qualifications into a short list of 4, and they were issued a request for proposals at the end of last month. Those responses are due on August 15th. And I wanted to point one thing out on this, that the RFP includes a community collaboration proposal, and this is actually a scored element of the proposal where firms would say how they would work with community, that how that the
their work as part of delivering a campus energy system, how that it could create opportunities that extend beyond the borders of the National Western Center campus and into the community. Examples might include jobs, might include education. There really is a host of ways that firms could collaborate with the community. And so we will be looking for responses on that, and it'll be scored as part of the RFP. So at the next CAC, we'll give you another update on that, but wanted to let you know how well that is going. Campus Energy is but one of a number of campus-wide services that we're going to be looking at over the next few months and coming years. This is a list here of the items that we are tracking from the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center that are campus-wide services that have a direct connection to the Capitol build. I mentioned energy. We've talked before here about a partnership with Metro and with Denver Water. A few that are also on our radar are IT infrastructure. So that's how you might create a smart campus, and maybe that's campus Wi-Fi, smart signage. Wayfinding signage will be part of that, and then also be looking at concessions across the campus. And so you will see us coming back each month and giving you an update on these, but wanted to give you a quick look forward of the campus-wide services that we are looking at. The authority will also be looking at other campus-wide services that may or may not have that connection to the Capitol build, to look at other sponsorship opportunities. And so I'm sure John and Liliana will be providing updates on that in future months as well. With that, I want to hand it over to Eric and Jay to come up and talk about placemaking. Is now time for questions?
No, since you're up there already, maybe you should do triangle.
Do you want to go ahead and skip and do triangle?
Yeah.
Happy to do that. Oh, look, I already have it queued up. Thank you.
I knew that.
So speaking of future procurements, one of the procurements that we're most excited about in 2019 is for bringing on a partner on the Triangle. We've talked about this before with this group, that the Triangle includes the area east of the rail at 60 acres, and there are 4 required assets that will be part of that. And that includes a redeveloped 1909 historic building into a public market. We've talked a lot about that. A 10,000-seat arena, a new expo hall, and then supported structured parking. And that helps to meet the parking need for phases 1 and 2, as well as for the future uses on the Triangle. We are working closely with the city's new PBI office, and I'll give you an update on that here on the next slide. The coordination with them is where we are right now. We're working on a business case development and starting to prepare for the development of a request for qualifications that we plan to issue later this year, in November or December of this year. That will then be followed in 2019 with an RFP, again, that will be issued to shortlisted firms. So we are continuing to move forward with the PBI process. I have a slide here. So PBI stands for Performance-Based Infrastructure. You may have heard before us refer to it as the P3 office, and PBI is another word for P3. Really, it's a broader term that incorporates a number of delivery systems that could be used for infrastructure. There is a team that is working in the mayor's office to stand that up, working closely with the city's Department of Finance and the city attorney's office and Public Works. And they have had conversations with city council and are working on a budget request that would then resource this office that would stand this up. So the way that this works is that our team on the project team will provide content to the city's PBI office, who really leads that procurement. And so you will, as we do the public processes associated with that procurement, you'll see members of that future PBI team here at CAC to provide updates on that procurement. Yes, Drew.
Question. So the Triangle, is there going to be a process for public spaces and public realm and placemaking, as we now have for the phases 1 and 2 on the west side of the railroad? Is there going to be an analogous or conjugate process for that, for placemaking, public realm in the Triangle?
You will see yes, you will see a similar process to what we've done in phases 1 and 2
Okay.
with the triangle, and so that will be part of the conversations with shortlisted teams to have a public process around that design.
Okay, because that's good, Brad, but I guess my concern is, I don't know a lot about P3, but what makes me a little nervous about them is it's sort of taking what were public assets and making them private. And that's just the way the world is going now, because we just don't have public funding for things. So my concern would be that somehow this triangle in some places or parts of it, either spatially or becomes basically private and closed to the public. I mean, your last slide showed how about equity, inclusion,
sure.
But how do we know that this doesn't become some privatized realm?
So you're going to have a mix of public and private uses within the triangle. So the 4 required assets, we anticipate those to take up approximately 18 acres of the 60 acres. That the balance of the 42 acres would be opportunities for there to be private uses and activation, and that might mean housing, that could mean office and jobs, and it could mean restaurants, entertainment uses, really a mixed use that really helps to activate the entire campus.
Any other questions for Brad, Marcy, or Karen?
Yep.
Susan?
I've got a couple. I'll just talk about it. So what's the process for defining those public uses within the triangle?
So the key public uses are these 4 required assets.
But what about the private uses?
Will there be a process for defining what private uses we want to see? So i.e., what will be the process for deciding how much housing is there, how much commercial is there? Should it all be business office? What's the process for that?
So as we are moving into development of the RFQ, that we will be working on that process, so welcome feedback on that. But we will look for, as part of the RFQ process, for firms to propose a mix of uses on the campus, and then we will be having a robust public process to work with the CAC and with the community on what that right mix is. And it's very similar to the master plan process.
I guess I'm worried that we should be defining what we want more than reacting to what's proposed.
John?
Yeah, along.
The process starts
So you,
as soon as the office is set up. So it's like a master planning process with community is very involved. And then a lot of the work you're doing, MIG.
A lot of the work that Jay and MIG is working on too is setting the standards for the campus, and so that one is not going to look like the other. There'll be, there's going to be continuity. It will look like a campus, the National Western Center campus, but the community process and the public process starts as soon as possible, as soon as we get the PBI officer, whatever gives us permission to kind of move forward, and then we begin that process. Very similar to the master planning is what we envision.
I think you answered it.
great, thanks.
The other question I had earlier was, will the language that was in the RFQ and RFP for the horizontal project be mirrored in the other RFQs and RFPs that are going on?
With the language on the workforce, there will be part of a larger conversation that we'll have around that. I mean, as I mentioned before, we are just beginning those conversations on the RFQ, and so
It looks like we're going out fairly soon.
I'm sorry.
I think, are you talking about the Equestrian Center and the Livestock Center, the 2 kind of signature buildings? Yes?
Well, you've got some RFQs already on the street. Is there workforce language in those RFQs?
On the Stockyard Event Center, no. There's not workforce language in those. Those were already in process when we were working on everything was working together, I believe. Or Patrick, you may want to add in something on this too, but those. the timing of how workforce was put together and all the work that we've done with city council was all in line. Or do you want to add to that, Patrick?
So I'll defer to Karen also, but the purpose of this is to be an iterative process. So we have Work Now right now, which is a program that's up and running, and we will find successes and probably faults with it. And each city contract is becoming iterative to bring that forward. But the intention is to use the Work Now as a base and build on that.
We'll talk about that. That's not the question.
I know, Susan, so let me try. So in regards to the workforce, in regards to the workforce plan, that was a pilot for the HIC, for the horizontal integrated contract. In regards to the vertical and the other upcoming, we are not doing a pilot workforce plan. That the pilot was for the HIC only. Didn't answer it.
I'm going to ask for...
And it also doesn't mean that the bigger contracts that are coming up, the ones that are in the blue, don't have some component of that in there. We're not there yet. The RFPs have been written. We haven't seen what the workforce language is coming or how the pilot is going, but there will likely be a component of that in those as well.
Hey, Brad, Marcy, Karen, could I just ask that you all schedule something where you could go over to the councilwoman's office and brief the councilwoman and Susan on this? Yes. All right, thank you. Any other questions for that trio? Okay, we'll move on to placemaking. Thank you.
Good evening. We have a couple of things that we wanted to hit on tonight. One thing that I will talk about is that the fact that if you recall when we had the work session, I think it was mid-June, where we went into the cultural plan in greater detail and the public space programming document. We'd like to do the same thing on the riverfront and then some of the public spaces in August. And so Liz is actually going to pass around kind of an analog version of a doodle poll. Yeah. So you can indicate what dates work for you, and we're going to choose a date for that.
So
and maybe we'll even know.
Only mark an X in the box of the days you can attend, okay? An X in the column of the days you can attend. You're going to set these in.
And don't just mark your preference, mark any days that can work for you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to give you a quick update on the stockyards. As you saw, the stockyards RFQ is out. They're waiting, or they're getting solicitations here. So we have some preliminary work, obviously, that is informing that. So I'll give you a quick peek on that. And then some of the upfront work on Riverfront. And that obviously will inform the design work that we'll do with you into August. But this is largely kind of setting the framework for the design. And then in August and in our subsequent meetings, we'll get into the detail of not just the riverfront open space and that public realm, but also starting to tie into the streets and the plazas and all of the different aspects and how they connect together. So the stockyards update, I have one slide. It's right here. And just to orient everybody, this is the BNSF and RTD rail. Here is the DRIR consolidated rail coming through. Here's the north edge of the livestock hall, livestock center. And then here's the equestrian barn coming through. The river is over here. The old Denver Hardwoods building is here. And then our maintenance facilities to the north. So as you know, this is 20 acres here at the north end of the campus, or at least butted up against the south edge of the rail coming through here. And recall that in the master plan, this was talked about as a multi-purpose event space. And so the thought is that much of the yards would be unobstructed most of the year. And so the pens, and we've talked about this previously, but the majority of the pens would actually be movable. And so they'd be called, there's something called a rock bottom. It's this large concrete base that then the fencing and the pen materials can go into. So those would come in for stock show and other events that might use the yards for livestock. Could be a large equestrian show might use it as well. And so that would come in. But then the majority of what you see here would be movable. And so those other 50 weeks, well, they'd be set up and take down. So, but the other, let's say, 11 months out of the year, there could be, again, a couple equestrian livestock events that would use this. But largely it could be used for other large events. And so what we're doing is looking at what you're seeing with the orientation and the aisles is making sure that it works really well for stock show, but then also that it's equipped for other types of events. So looking at the electrical, looking at the water, the drainage that would be feeding the yard, making sure that we're not creating obstacles that are these vertical obstacles that you could trip over or might obstruct the ability to do say a concert, set up stages, set up market stalls if it was a large art fair or a farmer's market. So those will all be flush, and then there'll be different types of mounts that you can put on there for water, for electrical. The permanent portion of the pens are actually going to be over here along the east edge of the yards area, or the multi-purpose event space. And so these would be for the bison. So the bison, those movable pens don't really work. If they get going and they push against one of the movable pens, it could push over and potentially injure somebody. So, so these would be permanent pens. There's some loading areas. And then this would be the Stockyards Event Center. So that's the building out in the yards. And we're really excited about that one because it's of a scale and of a nature actually it's almost like if you've been to what they call a black box theater, it's a very flexible space. It could be used for a gallery, it could be used for theater, it could be used for community events or meetings, all sorts of things. And so we think that this, and along with the sort of adjacent kind of public realm, public plaza space adjacent to it, will be a very active component year-round. So we're very excited about that piece. As you recall, there's discussions about the water tower being somewhere in this general vicinity. So we're working through different operational components of that, but that really being this kind of pinnacle view terminus as you maybe come up from National Western Drive, as you're coming over the pedestrian bridge, which would be right here. Here's the station. And so that is a vertical element again. And then also looking from the south, kind of through the buildings up to the campus, it becomes this kind of unifying element that you can see from all different angles, similar to what it is today. And then the last thing I guess I would point out is up here, operationally, is going to be loading and unloading. So that could be for a concert, potentially. If there's a really large event that's taking up the yards. Remember, this is 20 acres. So you can fit quite a few people in even one of these smaller chunks, anywhere along the lines of 2,000 to, we've estimated 15,000 people in a area this size. So it's very difficult to kind of tell the scale here. But during stock show in particular, or another stock show kind of related event, livestock or equestrian event, this would be used. There'd be loading docks. These are semi-trucks kind of queued up here in the image, just to kind of show for scale. I think that, and then this obviously is the underpass. So there's the rail is coming through here, and then to connect to maintenance and be able to move cattle from livestock out to the tie-outs here, or to move maintenance vehicle materials through to the yards, but also the rest of the campus without having to go all the way out to Race and then come down National Western Drive. There's the underpass in this component. So that's the stockyards. And then let me run through the riverfront, and then happy to take questions. So our riverfront update. We wanted to start, actually, because we haven't had a big conversation other than in the public space programming document about the riverfront in a while. So we wanted to start with the master plan. So importantly, there was the big ideas in the master plan. And one of those big ideas is improve access to and health of the South Platte River. And so a couple that we are thinking about for the physical kind of component, all of them are very relevant, of course, but the physical design component is improving the river habitat and health and creating recreational trails and educational areas along the river. Again, looking at the guiding principles, engaging the river, just calling out a couple things here, celebrating and respecting the natural world, build on current success in recreational activity along the river. I think it's really important that we don't think about, and this will apply to all of our public spaces, but we don't think about the riverfront open space in isolation. It's not in a vacuum. So how is it related to all the other existing and planned public spaces along the river, importantly, but also in the surrounding area? And then how is it really this integral connector for the community and for the campus? Also looking at physical access to nature and the river. So can we get to the river? Can we see the river? Those are really important components. How are we connecting the green spaces to one another? Replace or integrate physical infrastructure. That's really related to the Delgany. So I'll highlight that for anyone who doesn't recall what's happening there. Providing education and outreach on site, considering the impacts of the watershed in all stages of decision making, and then restoring these habitats along the river. So to that point of the connections to the larger river corridor and open spaces nearby, there's obviously the connections to existing parks. Argo Park was mentioned earlier, where the event is going to be held. And another shout out to the group in the back, great job. And then obviously the plans for the park to the north. Looking at the cemetery also as a really important resource. I know John reminds us frequently of that. But how is that sort of related not only to the trail connectivity, but also to the heritage, the cultural heritage of this area. And then we have the Globeville Landing Park down here as well. And I apologize for the naming. This is an older map. We'll get that updated.
Carpio Sanguinet.
Yep, thank you. Also in the master plan, just to remind everybody, there's water quality that takes place on the site. And this is probably a good reminder as we're beginning to move into the design and kind of concepts for individual public spaces on the campus. I think everyone wants to see trees and green, but there's also this balance of water quality, which is going to be green, hopefully a lot of the time. It'll be brown some of the time. We are in Colorado. And programmable space, spaces that you can use for a concert, even a picnic, informal kind of use of these spaces. So in the master plan, looking campus-wide, kind of full build-up, all the blue areas on here are representing water quality expectations. So those geographies, large and small, where we need to accommodate drainage and water quality throughout the site. So if you kind of, well, I guess it is probably blurry from where you guys are standing or sitting. You can see that there's quite an expectation for the riverfront open space as far as that water quality. So what we're trying to think about is how do you really integrate that into the design, have that be multi-purpose, habitat, thinking about ways that the community can interact with that it can actually serve as educational, interpretive elements as well, rather than just kind of focus it all in one place and create this one large unusable area. The corridor and that park context, when we zoom in a little bit further, here we go. We got a version with the Sanguinetti name on here. But thinking about, again, what are the programming elements? So it's about physical connection, which the best is right here across the new 51st Street Bridge. But those parks that are in close proximity, what are they providing to the community? So do they have playgrounds? Do they have picnic shelters? Do they have natural space? And are we competing with those and providing something that's already available to the community in close proximity? Or are we complementing those? And I think we have to do a little bit of both, honestly. There's some pieces of open space that are really, really critical. And then, whether it's nearby or not. And then there's other components that we don't really want to duplicate. We want to add to what's available for the surrounding area. So this is zooming in on a few of those parks, and it shows the scale of the parks. Our riverfront open space is about 6 acres. So that in comparison, that's about half the size of Argo Park. Looking at Carpio Sanguinetti, it's 80 acres, pretty large. A lot of that's natural with boardwalks, But as you have been following that process, you know there's also programmable space there where they could do food trucks. There's some fields and courts and things. Globeville Park has picnic shelters and a variety of other elements. Elyria actually has the skate park feature, picnic areas, and several others. Swansea Park, again, picnic areas, playgrounds, and Dunham Park, we have, again, picnic areas, playgrounds, and a few other elements there. And that's about half the size, for those of you who frequent these parks, those are about half the size of the riverfront open space. Yeah. It's Globeville Landing Park, yeah. Sorry, that's shorthand down there. What is the what? On which one? I don't recall what that big star is, to be honest with you. I think it might be a remnant, just kind of floating on there. I apologize. We'll fix that before we post it online.
I think it's where we're putting the John Sapien statue.
Okay, so this is just a summary of those. Again, our PowerPoint, like all of our presentations, will be online. So if you want to dive deeper into this, we've cataloged sort of what elements are available in which spaces. So just as an example, we have playgrounds at quite a few of the parks. It's at Carpio Sanguinetti when built out, Elyria Park, Swansea Park, Dunham Park, and Globeville Landing Park as well.
Is there any connection? Are you connecting all of these parks in any way, or just have all separate parks?
So the river helps tremendously, the trail connection.
A system that you looked at to connect all of them, and Globeville Green instead of a series of individual parks?
Yeah, so that has not been our charge to design that. We have, if you saw in our mobility sort of discussions, we are thinking beyond the campus edges though. And so we are highlighting those as priorities for continued investment in the area, and whether it's future bond projects or however that's funded. But yes, absolutely connecting those parks.
You're doing the vision, it would seem to be part of.
We're doing design for the campus.
Who does the vision?
I don't know, Brad, do you want to respond to that?
Who has the vision for connecting these parks?
To connect it up, to make Globeville really, and this whole area, green area, I mean, this is an opportunity where there's more than 100 acres of park here.
Right.
And we shouldn't have 10 separate parks. They should somehow be connected. You should be able to walk from one to the other without having to cross a bunch of streets. You should be able to go by the river and be able to sit and have a picnic. And it's a continuous thing, not you go here.
Right.
I mean, right now what you have is a bunch of separate parks, and I think that, you know, if we're going through this effort, well, I think we need to look at the connection.
Mickey, I don't want to be sarcastic, but actually you can get to those parks now, but you got to dodge the trucks, the drunks, and whatever else is in your way. We are in the neighborhood in the process of doing that, and it's going to take some more time, and it's going to take maximum effort of everyone that's been involved in the Washington Street project, the drainage effort, the Carpio Sanguinet meeting that's going to be held next month, and the meeting on the Platte River coming up next month as well. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm not trying to make little of your concern. It's a valid, very important concern because it's been mentioned at different levels. So it's serious, and it will be done, but it's going to take some time and effort in coordinating with all the other involvements that you've been a part of, and I and other people have it in attendance. So that's going to be ongoing.
Thanks. I would just add, Mickey, that completely valid thoughts there, and I appreciate that, and I'd be happy to take that back to the Parks and Recreation team as well as our mobility team to see how they are looking at that. Happy to do that.
Tim?
And then I have a few more slides too.
So quickly, your point's well taken, Mickey. Those were all part of the neighborhood plans that are now part of the new bond election, where we're going to be adding additional connectivity between the parks through the neighborhoods to existing bikeways, plans of that nature. It's also being looked at now in the next step study for the 41st and York station and how we'll connect from there, from the TOD, then to get to Washington Street, then through the parks. So that coordination and alignment is actually happening through those plans and actual investments starting to be made now. You'll see later on the bridges that National Western is going to be doing over the river. There is another study being done on connectivity for those, again, to increase access from each of the parks and through the community, so we've got connectivity. That was a major piece of your neighborhood plans, both for Globeville and for Elyria Swansea.
Thank you. Okay, Jay, if you could finish up your last few slides, that'd be great.
Okay. So back, I think there might be 6 or 7 more slides here. So public meeting number 1, if you recall, this was actually back, I think it was February 1st or February 2nd. And we presented the kind of options. If you remember, we were at that phase in the site planning where there were still multiple options. We were looking at west and east alignment. But in both of those, the riverfront was a really important component. So we asked about the riverfront program and events. And for those of you who remember, both in the presentation or if you were at the event, these are some of the materials that we used. And largely what we heard was emphasis on the riverfront access. And people talked about the importance of seeing the river, ideally having at least a spot or two where you could enter or interact with the river, whether that was for learning and testing and research or for recreation, having picnic areas, outdoor classrooms, trails, and then some sort of destination, something like food or drink or coffee house. It was kind of ambiguous exactly what people wanted, but some sort of small space that would attract people and be sort of a constant programming element, even when there was not a community event in the space. So some programming opportunities, these are the last, I think it's 4 slides here. So this is what we would call a framework diagram. This is not even close to design at this point. So what we're going to share with you this evening is this framework diagram and then some preliminary programming concepts related to that. What we'll come back to you with when we have the deep dive session in August are some preliminary concepts for you all to roll your sleeves up with us and start to talk about pros and cons, other things you'd like to see within those spaces. So to sort of articulate this really quickly, these areas here would be more natural, in part serving some of that water quality feature. But we're looking at, as we're beginning the design process, thinking about how do you interact with those. And so I think there's a lot of different opportunities for that. There could be trails or boardwalks crossing them. There could be ways to get down into these spaces if they are depressed in some areas. For testing, for recreation, maybe there's opportunities to grow food in some of these spaces. Then we have on the south end, which would be pretty unique, would be the opportunity to do something like that coffee house or some sort of vertical permanent development that is a destination along the riverfront. And if you remember, in the site plan, Betty Cram Drive is that really important kind of Main Street, east-west community connector. And so that's really adding to that activation of Betty Cram Drive along here and the breadcrumb effect that we're creating. Then creating at least a couple of other spots along here where there's opportunities for programming. That would be flag and host events. Again, this is 6 acres, so we're talking about half an acre acre in some of these spaces. So they're actually pretty large scale. And then obviously the riverfront edge here as well. The red line, if you recall from way back when we were talking the site plan, is the delineation of basically the Army Corps project and the authority sort of operated riverfront open space. We're obviously going to be coordinating with them, and we'll roll you into those conversations about how do these actually function as one space. We don't want there to feel like there's a line, obviously, and it needs to feel like one continuous space out to the edge there. So this is our initial, and I'll zoom in on this, don't worry, programming idea. I just have 2 more slides, Joy. And so I'll just zoom in on the top part and the bottom part of this. So this is that northern half. So this is the 51st Avenue Bridge. Here's National Western Drive. And so again, thinking about some of the programming opportunities, I won't read everything on here. But since maybe our hand isn't super legible, I'll point some things out. So the Delgany Pipe. While the Delgany is going to be buried underneath the west edge of National Western Drive through the majority of this area, there is an area that will not be taken out. It's still existing up here as of right now, at least. And so thinking about how does that pipe interact with the site? Is there potential to incorporate it into the design? Does it need to be bermed? But again, it's just at this northern edge. Thinking about the programming opportunities at the bridge, we think those community connections across the river are really important places to program and activate. And so looking at opportunities for open lawn area, picnic areas, as people have called out. Maybe this is where kids' play areas are, whether they're more formal, traditional, or nature play types of elements with educational opportunities. The riverfront area, of course, is outside of that sort of delineation on that last map. But that's where we're looking at river access, native trail, really coordinating on opportunities for educational programming, small group areas. The sheep bridge down here, at this point we really are trying to keep that in place, think about how to integrate it into the design and have it be this great heritage element as well as an iconic feature along here. And then represented with the red here is the multi-use path that will be sort of connecting National Western Drive to the riverfront open space, and will be, landscaped, of course, and we'll play around with different ideas for that with you in August. And then opportunities for additional trails, paths, loops within the riverfront open space as well. Looking at the southern portion, and then I'm done, I promise, is looking at, again, programming around the sheep bridge. I don't think it's enough to just have the sheep bridge sitting in place. Like, how are we really utilizing that and leveraging that? Looking at the detention ponds or water quality features. In some places they will be more formal detention ponds, but we want to make those as usable and sort of active as possible. And so we're looking at a lot of different precedents, and we'll bring those to you in August of how other communities, other countries, looking at really innovative examples from Denmark and Amsterdam and these other places. And then, again, the southern program space with really great views and physical access to the river, river lookout. Could it be a takeout? Understand that we're downriver from what's happening at Confluence Park, at Cuernavaca, these other River North Park. And so, could this actually be a takeout space? And then, not take out food, that would be takeout if you're using the river, you're floating, canoeing, kayak. Maybe there's takeout at the restaurant or cafe. Community garden, and I don't think that's limited to just this one area. We really want to, this is going to be, quite honestly, the softest part of the campus. And so other places integrate food and agriculture into this entire riverfront open space. Again, looking at places for open lawn, because when we're looking at all those open spaces around, that's the one thing that is lacking, I would say. And it's difficult, I think, to ask people to travel 2 miles to, go use an unprogrammed kind of open space. And then finally, thinking about a covered pavilion, outdoor education types of spaces as well. So those are some of the initial thoughts this sort of gives you the background heading into the design session with us in mid-August. But I can take any questions or comments at this point.
John?
No,
Okay.
he addressed my concern.
Okay. Drew?
How much, Jay, are you considering like restoring habitat? Because rivers are natural corridors for that, and you know.
Yeah, quite a bit. So
there's some continuity. Not to interrupt you, you know that you can't have splotches of, you know, you kind of want the bigger the areas and more just uninterrupted, the better. So
yeah, absolutely. So I think if you look back at this one, I know it looks like a lot of scribbles, but I think the idea would be that this is absolutely sort of continuous, right, in habitat and restoration. And that's part of the river project. And then I think we're trying to think about sort of, you look, kind of think like this, right? So this would be the natural habitat. And so you have these fingers of programmable space kind of interacting with that, but that the habitat is continuous. It just sort of ebbs and flows along the riverfront. And we'll look at different opportunities to do that with different design aesthetics, different kind of treatments, different ways to traverse the space.
I have a question in reference to, and maybe I missed the last meeting. Where's the 48th or 49th Avenue crossing? What happened with that?
I didn't know that there was supposed to be.
Well, Betty Grant Drive.
Do you mean right here? Yeah.
What's that?
This is a bridge. This is Betty Cram.
But is that 49? That's 48.
Is that 48th is where it connects on the west side?
So it got moved down to 48.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess one of the other questions that I had is, as you spoke about the working with the Army Corps of Engineers, and all of this basically presents everything that you're doing on the east side of the river. And so I'm really concerned about what's going to be left, or what's going to happen on the west side of the river, and I would like to see a whole picture of this whole development and how that's going to turn out, and not be in a situation to where you know, you've had conversations with them, but yet it doesn't get presented to where everybody's at the table, and you both are showing the development on both sides of the river, at least as it pertains to the river, the riverfront there.
Yeah. So this is a programming kind of thought process, I guess. When we come back in early August, we can absolutely show the plans that have been shared with us for both sides of the river, so you can see that interaction between the two.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comment.
Hey, Herb, do you know about their public meeting that they're having? I think it's next week for the urban waterways. Yes, okay, sure you do.
And AE for the final question.
I appreciate, I was going to mention that, thank you, because I'm with Vern on this. We have to keep calling out that, and when I hear somebody say, we'll show you the plans we've been shown, that's different from saying the planning is a process that's, you know, real participatory. So, but what I...
Just to clarify, we want to come with some preliminary thoughts for us to all discuss.
Okay, when you said the plans you've been given, I guess it gave me an impression somebody,
sorry.
you know,
Yeah.
but good. Small, but to me important thing. I want to see horse accessibility.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to picture that. I know there's mixed opinions and it has to be studied, but is there a way to have that as part of the because we're talking about having horse trails and things like that, and then in addition to that, I mean, you could ride an alpaca if you're small enough. And the other thing is, I'm trying to get a picture on the whole project of if there's more visibility for the vastly wide range of livestock that comes through. You know, it's nice to have the stockyards and everything, but you know, sometimes you either have to be inside the big arena in the venue, or you have to be inside, or you can right next to. And I'm just wondering, are there ways that we're developing more visibility as you're on the exterior or walking through to interact and see the livestock?
Yeah. They're definitely the livestock would actually be on this side of the equestrian building, right? And so you're right, the yards actually come to about right here. So there is sort of access there, to your point. This is the equestrian center, though. This is the animal health facility. And so the design, we don't quite know the layout of this yet, obviously. But I think we can definitely start to think about that and talk about that more in August. Both the access potentially for small animals or, horses in the riverfront space, but then the visibility to what's happening at this layer here.
Yeah, okay. Can you give her the tools?
It's actually not a bad idea. The city also just bought the urban farm, which is at 40th and Smith Road. We're not too far from there, but that would kind of be a cool overlap with National Western.
Yeah, that's part of what made me think of that, because I didn't know what was going to happen with that. But as far as youth engagement and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And David, for the absolutely last question.
The last question.
I don't mean to back you up, but
no, you're fine.
When Betty Cram comes out on 48, there's a railroad track that goes across the river.
Right.
Is Betty Cram going to come on the north side of it or the south side of it?
I believe it's on the north side, right, Eric? Yeah, north side.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would, I apologize, I don't have our full site plan in this deck, but in essence, that cutoff is here, coming across, and then here's Betty Cram at 48.
So it'd be about Elgin then? Elgin Street?
I couldn't tell you, I'm sorry. I can look at my phone when we're done and show you. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
We're announcing a meeting time?
Yes.
Yeah, we're announcing a meeting time, I'm told.
So in the course of everybody filling out this, we realized that one of the dates was when there's a meeting about Heller Open Space, Carpio, Sanguinet Park. So that's the 21st, so we don't want to conflict with that. And then it was sort of a tie. The 13th is a Monday, and it's a council meeting. That was sort of, we put that as the kind of the last alternative. So it looks like we're going to do Thursday, August 23rd at 5:30 for a special CAC meeting. I will send out announcements about that, but I just wanted to make sure this was the quickest way to do it. So we will have a special meeting on Thursday, August 23rd at 5:30 p.m. And then we will meet again for our regular meeting on Thursday, August 30th for just the regular meeting. So there you go.
All right, thank you. We have about 15 minutes left on the clock. Mr. Sandos, you can have 10 of those 15 minutes.
I hope not to need that much. Oh, thank you very much. So I probably would like to save a little bit of time for next meeting, so we'll have a little bit more to talk about. The one thing that I did want to speak about tonight was the variance for sound that is coming up before the Department of Environmental Health Board. Many of you have heard about that. Just yesterday, I sent out a response to requests that I had gotten from a number of people in this room and others about what the process was going to be. And I really want to focus on the process for variances as it occurs for the Department of Environmental Health, and that's also managed through by Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. The document can actually be found on the website for the Department of Environment and Public Health. You can grab one of those and pass them out. There are 4 segments that the policies and processes speak to. One of them are variances. So what I'm passing out now are just copies of the variance section so that you don't have to wade through the entire document. Even this is pretty lengthy. But in it, it describes what the process is going to be for how this will be handled. Now, right now, as most of you know, KMP is amending their existing application or petition, as it's referred to in the document, for a variance for Denver's noise ordinances. They have requested another date to be set for sometime in September for the hearing. They are awaiting a response from the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment as to what that date would be. But it is likely to occur in September for the public hearing and for the hearing that's held by the board. To correct some misinformation that I've seen out there. The decision is made in its entirety by the Denver Environmental Health Board. It does not go to the city council. It is not the responsibility of the mayor, but rather goes to the board. The process is that the applicant will submit their petition to DDPHE. DDPHE then provides that to the board along with recommendations for changes, if any, that they would be recommending. Those then go to the board, and then those are reviewed at the public hearing. The process is in here, so I won't bore you with the details, but you go through, you hear both the applicant's petition and what they are asking for. You will then hear any response that comes from the Denver Department of Public Health of any recommended changes that they would have. Then the public hearing occurs. People have 3 minutes to respond in the public hearing to anything that was in the applicant's process. And so that is the process in short of what will happen. Again, I put in all of the details here for you to look at. I think I need my glasses. Oh, thank you. I apologize. One of the things that's been asked quite a bit is what is the burden of proof for the applicant in their petition. That comes under section 3.025. It is the petition has to prove that they will suffer an undue hardship if the variance is not granted. B, a variance, if granted, would not adversely affect public health. And C, the variance, if granted, would be in harmony with the spirit and purpose of the ordinance, rule, or regulation being appealed. So those are the criterion by which the application for the petition are going to be measured. Again, we will let you know as soon as we have an absolute date for the hearing. At that point in time, again, you'll be able to learn from the KMP the things that they're going to be looking for. I think they're planning to have communications with the community over that period of time, which is one of the reasons that they had asked for the extension for the hearing. That is pretty much what I wanted to talk about now. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have. If you'd like to call and ask others, we're happy to take that up.
So thanks, Tim.
Sorry. Thanks, Tim, for this explanation. One of the questions I have is, at the meeting that was to be held like last week in July, we had the DDPHE staff report was available to the public, so we got to see that was available to the public. Is there going to be this new petition that Kiewat's putting? Is the DDPHE staff report going to be available prior to this hearing?
Yeah, and what they do, and I don't have an exact answer for that other than to say that they are following the procedure as has been defined since 2014. So if in fact that was released then, yes, it would be released again. In here does, and I'm sorry, I should know that better, there are two time frames. One time frame is delivery of the application or the petition 10 days in advance of the board meeting to the board. They have to receive it before anybody else can. And that is in one of the sections in here give me just a second, I can turn you directly to it.
So Tim, you're saying Kiewit Meridium delivers their application to the board 10 days in advance, and then the board, do they prepare a staff report, and is that available to the public before this hearing?
Yeah, and let me clarify that a little bit more. If you go to 3.03, it's actually the second page of the document that you should have before you. Nope, I just lost myself, excuse me. I'm sorry, it's 3.07. It's under, called the hearing. The page number on the document that you have to be page 13. It describes that the department has to file a response to the petition that's provided to them, to the board, and that's a 14-day.
Well, this says the department may file a response. You're saying they will.
Well, yeah, they will or they may, and what the difference is they may accept the application in full. If they were to accept the application in full, then they wouldn't have a recommendation. If they have recommendations, then they provide that plus the application to the board. And as this points out, the response is due within 14 days of the department's receipt of the petition. Then the next section, it says for variance requests that the department opposes, the department must inform the board and petitioner of its opposition at least 10 days before the scheduled hearing. So again, if that's where you get the difference in the 14 and 10 days. But it's after the point in time that they receive the application.
That's if they oppose, but what if they endorse it as they did with the previous application? Do they have to tell the public anything?
Yeah, and I don't believe that they had endorsed it in the last.
I think they approved. I think they approved of granting the variance.
I would differ. The reason, again, back to your own point, they wouldn't write what their response is for the board to give direction of where they'd go unless they had recommendations to change that. And as you said, they received a recommendation, or you received a recommendation. And so that means that they did not agree with the application in its entirety. They were making recommendations of what they would add or change.
Oh, okay. Okay, one more question. I was told by an attorney that this is Section 3, which has very limited options for public participation, and if the rules were proceeded under there's a Section 4, there is option for much more robust public participation. So if this is what applies to Section 3, you say that for public participation, there will be 3 minutes to respond, but is that response period limited? I mean, is this like city council where they have an hour and they just say, we'll fit in as many people in an hour and that's all it is, we're cutting it off after?
No, actually, there's a section in here that describes that too, and I'll summarize it so I don't waste time trying to find it.
Sure.
But what it allows the board to do is take as much public input as they would have until it does allow them to cut off public participation if what they're hearing starts to be repetitive or is completely repetitive over what they do. Repetitive over what they've heard previously. Now, to your point about the other 3 sections in the area, again, each of those sections describes a different kind of hearing that the board is doing. In this particular instance, it's a variance, so it's subject only to the rules of the variance, not any of the other 3 that are in the rules and guidelines. In the document I sent you yesterday, it has all 4 sections, so you can read all 4 if you would like. I was just trying to cut to the chase because this is the process that they will actually follow.
So one more question. I think this is the last one. I'm concerned because I was told today by somebody, I think it was somebody at the Denver Post, that Kiewit isn't going to even need a variance for 6 months. And there just seems to be this rush to do this, and I'm concerned. The problem with the first hearing is you announced it over 4th of July holiday. We had no time to look at it, and I think that's why it really went over very poorly. And so is there some way that, I mean, what I'm very nervous about is that the board's just going to, roll over for Kiewit, and the communities don't really have any chance to prepare. We don't have lawyers, we don't have a CRL to help us. And so is there something that could be organized to work with Kiewit and the affected communities to find the stakeholders, not have this open zoo of public participation that happens so often, but to really try to find a solution that balances the interests of Kiewit, besides them getting their bonuses for finishing early, You know, I mean, and addresses the concerns of the community. I mean, noise is a serious problem. I don't do too well on no sleep. And I'm very worried about this.
Tim, before you answer, I'm going to ask that this be the last question on this line here about Central 70, because it's getting a little too far afield from our focus as the CAC, and it's probably better addressed somewhere else.
I don't know where we address it. So, parents, that's the problem.
I understand, but I think it's incumbent upon the NDCC to figure out where that gets addressed, and that we kind of stay focused on where we are.
Yeah, so this was part of the NDCC report, or the only thing on the NDCC report, which is why it comes up now. In terms of your questions, I would agree with you, and upon further reflection, the earlier application, KMP had determined that they wanted to take more time to work with the community and be able to have the community understand what it was they were asking for, why they were asking, those sorts of things. So it was their request to extend the time. That's why the request for a different date, sometime in September, was made by KMP. It's, as I understand, their intention to work with the community around what it is that they're recommending or what they're needing to do and why, and to be able to have conversations with the community about that. Regarding DDPHE, because this is a quasi-judicial process, and because they are the ones conducting the process, they themselves cannot take a position or work on one side or the other in terms of what they're going to be presenting to the board. That is, and you'll read it in the guidelines, how they must react and must act based on the process. So I think other people agree with you. You've clearly had other people, large numbers who have responded about this, that they would like to testify about it, that they'd like to learn about it and speak about it. And under that reflection, KMP is now both redrafting their application so that they can share it with the community and have this additional time to do so.
AE.
I don't know. I mean, I can just yell. One, could you send that communication to Liz so she can get it to the community members, at least on the CAC, and maybe that'll be a good briefing. The link between, there's an advisory committee that is forming, and Albus Brooks is working on this. I'm surprised it wasn't part of the report, that I would like to suggest can also link with the National Western Center monitoring around noise and dust. That we're in this vicinity, and I feel like, and this is partly an answer to your concern, Drew, as far as a mechanism, that there has to be block by block participation on this. There has to be an inventory of each household as to how it's affected. And the reason I'm persisting a little, this is an area where I think the overlap of the environmental impacts of the noise and the dust with the National Western Center and Central 70 are part of what should be coordinated for solutions, because it's going to impact that same grid from 44th to 48th and longer, and then from Brighton to... So anyway, I just want to say I hope that people on the ground in the neighborhood will get out there, and that this won't just be a political thing, that to me is part of the answer. Day-to-day reporting back about what people are seeing, minute by minute even, and that, you know, with the noise, the dust, and how's the monitoring being done, there's that kind of very the specificity, talking about the budget of the vouchers, for hotels, talking about all of these things in response to the day-to-day life. Because the NWC is going to be creating the same issues in some of these arenas.
Chai.
Okay, and just a couple points. The committee that Councilman Brooks is putting together, he's driving that. I only don't speak to it because that's his... Oh, thank you. And I'm sorry, Chai. So you can speak to that if you would like. I think it's more appropriate for their office to speak to it to me. We are going to be working with Councilman Brooks' office to put this together, but I feel it's more appropriate for your office to present that than me.
Albus has met with Kiewit, and we are working with them to put together a group, which some people have reached out about already, including Drew, to be on this committee. So we're looking at that and working on the details of what that's going to look like. It'll definitely include residents of the impacted area, and also, what else was I going to say? We're hoping to put that together in the next couple of weeks. So.
And then relative to your questions on noise and dust measurements, air quality measurements, there are a number of procedures that are in place to do both of those things throughout the community, and I'm sure that we'll be doing the same things with National Western as we are with Central 7.
I forgot to add too, Tim, and actually our office is also doing our own research on the impact to the residents regarding air and also noise pollution. So we're going to have some of that information as well to be able to have some information to share with Kiewit on, on how we move forward.
But the intention certainly for the air quality and the noise, since we're going to be doing a noise variance, if the variance were to pass, would include measurements of sound that would all be made available to the community. The air quality measures are currently available to the community online right now.
Any other questions for Tim? Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Are there any announcements? Anything for the good of the order? All right, thank you all. Jim?
I think we have our Adelante 5K event that will be Sundays at the Stapleton Rec Center in Martins.
Those of you who want to run a 5K, on behalf of Clinic
It's a community festival.
a community festival. I'll come for the community festival. I'll skip the 5K. Have a good night, everybody. See you next month.